is Antarctica. Well south of the Antarctic Circle, these are the glaciers of Grahamland, in the British sector of the Antarctic continent, known politically as the Falkland Islands Dependencies. Here, British explorers and scientists have been working continuously since 1944 from a series of met stations round the coast, mapping the country and making geological surveys. To travel around in such countries, we use the oldest, most reliable, cheapest, and most enjoyable form of polar transport, huskies. I am going to show you the methods and techniques we employed when dog sledging at Base W on the Lubei coast in 1957. It is important to emphasize that this is only one way of driving huskies. I personally recommend it, but I don't expect anyone else to follow it exactly, because dog drivers are notoriously dogmatic about their own particular methods, and because different terrain and climate needs different techniques. The husky's reputation for fierceness is quite unjustified so far as human beings are concerned. The main difficulty is to teach them not to jump up and lick your face. One family or one team of dogs are often very pally with one another, but on the whole huskies are pugnacious amongst themselves and hence should always be kept tied up. If a fight like this starts, drastic action is called for to separate them before an animal is mauled to death. A rope's end is an effective weapon. A husky is tough, and if you chastise him gently, he merely wags his tail at you. Occasionally you meet a shy dog who takes a liking to the seat of your trousers, but that is rare. Let's take a look at the dogs in my team. Those two white ones are brothers Kelly and Mate. Then there's Porgy, the black one, Millie, a bitch from the other team, Steve, who is Porgy's twin. They have rather sleek physiques and are a very fast pair. Ben, only 1 year old but weighing 104 pounds, a magnificent dog. Scott, another young dog, rather quiet and self-possessed. Fluke and Bodger, the two strongest dogs. And finally, Ricky, our only red dog. In this case, the leader dog is Bodger, who is also the king dog or boss of the team, but this is unusual. It is better to have your tough king dog at the back of the team and your cleverest dog as leader. And here's the other team you'll be seeing, an all-bitches team. They are excited about something. Ah yes, it's Charlie Boy and a Daily Penguin, a nice tasty din-dins. But evidently Charlie has an appointment at the bank. Now let's look at the equipment. The dog's harness is made out of lampwick, which is soft and pliable, yet fairly strong. It must be carefully fitted to the individual dog. This is how not to put one on. The correct way is to hold the dog between your knees so that he cannot wriggle. Unhook the chain, put the harness over the head, left leg through, right leg through, and make sure the dog's collar is clear. Sometimes a young dog will chew his harness. This must be deprecated at once by rubbing the harness through his mouth and clouting him over the nose. He won't do that again in a hurry. Always keep your dog's harnesses in perfect condition, even if it means sewing on patches in the tent each night. On crevassed glaciers, your dog's lives may depend on their harnesses holding them, and your life depends on the mobility of your dog team. Now for the sledge and the traces. We used the center trace method modified slightly like this and the Nansen type 12-foot sledge. The tow rope of the sledge is tied round the center pillar on either side of the sledge, taken once round the next pillar and once round the front one, and led through the grommet under the cowcatcher. One side of the tow rope is then put through the rear eye splice of the center trace and tied to the other side of the tow rope by a double sheet bend. The rear two dogs are secured here on 5-foot traces. Then comes a 10-foot length of the thick center trace, joined to the next 7.5-foot section by a cow hitch. Two 2.5-foot side traces for the next two dogs are attached here. Two more side traces here. Two more here, and also the leader dog on a single 3-foot trace. 9 dogs altogether. The sledge can be anchored when you stop by hammering in a metal picket which is permanently attached to the back of the sledge. These wire braces are tightened by bottle screws. A plank with a metal adze on the end is used to brake the sledge by pressing down with the foot so that it digs into the snow. The Nansen sledge has no nails or screws, only rawhide or wire lashings. These should be rarely taut before a journey, otherwise they soon work loose like this in rough going. Look after your sledge as carefully as a sports car. Put on several coats of linseed oil before the start of the season's sledging. Let's go off on a training run on sea ice. This young bitch, Shirley by name, has always been frightened of open leads of water, so she is given some practice first to make her realize that there is nothing to it. And then away we go. The first thing to notice is that the driver is standing on the back of the sledge, in this case quite unnecessarily. It is bad for the runners, tending to straighten out the rear curve. The runners being curved at both ends, of course, so that the sledge can be reversed if necessary. The main danger on sea ice is thin ice, usually distinguished by its dark color, which is found at the beginning and end of the season, anywhere where there are tidal races. Windy regions are also suspect, because the ice may be blown out to sea during one night's gale. Hello? What's this? A seal. This is a test of a good team, whether they can be persuaded not to rush at any seal that appears. This sea ice is comparatively good going. It can be very rough where it is pressed up in front of glacier snouts, where it has been broken up by the wind, or where summer brash ice has been frozen in with the rest. Here, Shirley's lessons pay dividends. This is just a small pressure ridge. You can see now how lashings can work loose. We are going off on a proper camping journey. Here's how to lash a load onto the sledge. The boxes containing the sledging rations are specially made with chocks, which fit the sledge longitudinals to make the load more secure. Never put anything heavy in front of the front bridge or behind the rear bridge. Sleeping bags can be conveniently put at the back. Make sure the paraffin can is spout up. The tent goes on top. For lashing up, rope loops are permanently tied round the side of the sledge between all the pillars. A 30-foot coil of 1-inch rope is then passed from side to side through the loops. Now tighten it up really taut, squashing down soft things like sleeping bags and skins. Secure the end of the lash line with a slip knot on top of the load. Then it is easy to get at if the sledge falls on its side. Push in on top anything you might need during the day. Skis, ice axe, ski sticks. A canvas sledge bag is slung on the handlebars for stowing things like spare gloves, notebooks, cameras. A climbing rope and spare harnesses and traces are also hung there. And now we're ready to go. An easy run along the sea ice, and then over the tide crack onto the land and up a steep slope. This is where the hard work begins. This young team are wasting a lot of energy. You must try and get your dogs to take the strain simultaneously when you give the order. Easier said than done. Here's Shirley in difficulties again. She always was a bit of a clown. On a steep hill like this, you may have to resort to having somebody walking ahead to encourage the dogs. Please remember it is only a last resort, and very much a temporary one. If your leader dog gets used to having somebody in front, you are done for. There is not much to say about going uphill, except the somewhat obvious remark that if you have a very heavy load on your sledge, you will have to relay up the steepest parts. In this case, the sledge load was only about 500 pounds. On the flat, you can carry about 1,000 pounds, or even up to 1,200 with a really fit team. You will notice the amazing thing about huskies is the fact that they positively enjoy pulling a sledge. That is one reason that makes dog driving so pleasant compared to driving mechanical vehicles. At last the slope eases off. And here they are on level snow again. Whenever possible, the best position for driving dogs is skiing along, holding onto the handlebars with one hand, and if necessary with a short line in the other hand to the front of the sledge. Wearing skis is a safeguard against soft snow, weak sea ice or crevasses. It is far better than the method of sitting on the sledge and periodically running to keep warm, but it does need a certain amount of practice. The dog team is controlled by word of mouth. There are no reins. A great deal depends on having a good, intelligent leader dog who obeys orders well. To start, the order, "Up dogs, wheat," is given. When the sledge is heavily laden, it is important that the dogs give their initial pull together, and you may also have to jerk the front of the sledge at the same moment. To stop, the order is, "Ah." Avoid putting the brake on for this. The dogs must learn to stop at your order and not because of the feel of a drag. Once they are stopped, give the order, "Lie down," and make sure they do so. Otherwise they tend to wander around and tangle up the traces or start fights. In certain conditions of weather, the snow balls up under the dog's pads. Here Millie is cleaning her paws. For changes of direction, the whip is used. To make the leader wheel round to the right, flick the snow with the whip just to the left of him and order, "Ouk, ouk." He turns away from the whip. When he is well trained, the whip will be unnecessary. The order to turn left is, "Ir, ir." When on a proper journey, don't let the dogs gallop. It is an uneconomic method of locomotion, and the dogs soon tire. A fast trot is the best. That's better. And now let's see how we pitch our camp in the evening. This looks a reasonable campsite. first thing to do is to anchor the sledge and to stake out the dogs. Somebody's not obeying the order to lie down. In this case, we have a special extension to the center trace so that the dogs can be spanned out singly. It is fitted to the front splice of the center trace. We anchor the front end with a picket, but as the snow is rather soft, we put in an additional anchor called a dead man. This is just a square piece of wood which is buried in a vertical position with the rope pushed well down so that the pull comes horizontally. We spread the dogs out along the span. We do not take their harnesses off on this occasion because we are moving camp tomorrow. If we had been staying put for 2 or more days, we would take off the harnesses. Unhook the trace from the harness and clip it onto the collar. Put the hook right round the collar, not on the D-ring, and make sure the opening is facing forward so that it cannot catch on the dog's harness. Have a periodic check-up that no sores are developing from badly fitting harnesses. Your dog's welfare is of prime importance. One dog is tied to the sledge itself. We now unlash the sledge, put the tent down in the allotted place, and place some spare ration boxes ready in position to put on the skirting of the tent. Before we go any further, we feed the dogs. Today they only get 1 pound of pemmican each, but they certainly appreciate the meal. The proper ration is 1.5 pounds a day, and if possible, a meal of fresh seal meat once a week. Lovely. Paper and all. Porgy is burying some of his for a midnight snack. Steve is having a nice scratch. Fluke has somehow got hold of an empty butter tin and is giving it a good going over. Now we can put the tent up. The snow brush, a very important implement, is kept in the tent cover. To keep the inside of the tent dry, snow must be swept off every object before going in. And there's the ground sheet. Spread the tent out like this, then dig the front legs into the snow simultaneously. Go to the back of the tent and push the back legs in. We put the boxes on the skirting as weights and use skis or ice axes to hold the guys. A pyramid tent like this can be erected just as easily in a strong wind, providing you always point the apex into the wind until it is up. The inside man, or cook for the night, can now go in and start getting organized inside. The outside man hands in the sleeping bags and the cooking box and rations. He then shovels snow over the skirting to make quite sure the tent will be secure, even if a blizzard gets up during the night. There is nothing more unpleasant than a night excursion in dirty weather to secure the tent. The dogs by now are settling down for the night. Snow blocks are obtained for water and placed in between the inner and outer tent walls. He does up the canvas sledge bag so that it is not full of drift snow in the morning, and coils up the whip to be out of reach of any dog who might eat it. The fuel can is placed on one side of the door, and in he goes, doing up the door behind him. Notice the ventilator at the top of the tent. Ah, that welcome cup of tea. This is the best time of the day. And as long as our ventilator is not blocked up by snow or ice, we will have a nice, cozy night's sleep. In the morning, of course, we move on again, but it's usually worth spending half a minute scraping the undersurface of the runners clean before we start. And now let's move on to the subject of sledging downhill. Having gravity on one side is not always an advantage. A gentle descent is very pleasant, but a steep descent becomes exciting and can be dangerous. This is a bit of a shambles. The sledge has overtaken the dogs. One of them may be injured, and very likely the sledge will capsize and the handlebars will be broken. The plank brake should be sufficient to hold you back on a medium hill. If you're traversing slightly, the spare man can stand on the uphill runner like a motorcycle outrider. For steeper hills, it is necessary to put on a rope brake. This is attached to the center pillar on either side of the sledge and passes under the runners, causing a heavy drag. It should jam about 2/3 of the way back along the sledge. To make it most effective, sit on the sledge with your weight immediately above it. Now you are under control again. One dodge I can also recommend is to modify the plank brake so that you can apply it by hand while you are skiing. Of course, most of this film was taken in good weather, and it tends to give the impression that the Antarctic is a place with a good climate. This is far from the case. You will find that you are held up by strong winds 1 day in 4 on the average, and you will also meet soft snow like this, which makes travel impossible. On a lie-up day, you go out of the tent just for about 10 minutes to feed the dogs, fetch some more snow blocks for water, and go round the back of the tent to see a man about another dog. Well, that's it. I have only touched on a few aspects of dog sledging. One could go on talking about it forever. Take my word for it, it's great fun. Try it sometime.